Hi, everyone. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about the activity of rhetorical analysis and kind of get a little bit more in depth about with what you're doing for this assignment. So the goal of any rhetorical analysis is to ultimately kind of boil it down to the idea that somebody is making an argument to an audience, right? So, somebody's trying to either inform, convince, persuade, redefine, whatever the purpose of their argument is. They're trying to do something for a target audience. And so what you're doing in this paper is thinking about that through the lens of Facebook or Twitter. So you're picking a public figure, a politician, an artist, whoever, and you're thinking about how do they use this social media platform for a particular goal or goals, right? It doesn't have to be a singular goal. They might have a couple of things they're trying to do. And then how do they succeed at that or not? So, because the ultimate question you're answering is whether do they use this platform effectively or not to achieve their goal. Now, in this case, Facebook and Twitter are the context, right? So we're going back to the rhetorical situation that you learned about a little bit more last week, right? There's always an argument, right? There's always a purpose, and then there's an audience, and then there's a context in which these arguments occur. So, part of what you're looking at is how do Facebook and Twitter shape what that message is, how it's conveyed, how audiences engage and respond, and things like that. And so as you're getting into a rhetorical analysis, you're really thinking about you're thinking a lot about audience, and this asks you to go into a mode where maybe you might not be the audience that the person is targeting through their Facebook or Twitter profile, right? Maybe you are, right? So it's nice if you are, because that kind of gives you some inside point of view, right? But so let's say you want to look at somebody like Bernie Sanders, right? Who's been running for president recently, and you want to think about who is his audience, right? Who is he trying to reach out to, and who's his campaign trying to reach out to through Facebook or Twitter? And then what is that argument? What are they trying to do? And then how is that accomplished? So, and I use Sanders because I've pulled him up in class recently. A lot of people like to do him for this paper, which is fine if you want to analyze Bernie Sanders, Facebook or Twitter profile. But one of the things that his campaign does really well is they have these images, and it's usually an image of him talking somewhere, and it's accompanied by often a quote or a statistic. And it's all embedded in the actual image itself. And what's really smart about that is that when you think about Facebook or Twitter, right, how easy it is to reshare something. If you retweet something or you share a post, right, all the text you have around that post, it could go away, right? People could just share the image itself. And so by having that content in the image itself, it's really easy and accessible for anybody who wants to share it with their own network. On top of that, right, it's not dense. You think about Facebook or Twitter, think about how often, or just anything you do on, right? How long do you spend reading something that you're maybe kind of interested in or not really engaged in? So if you're not caught, if your attention isn't caught right away, then it's really kind of, you're lost, right? There's so many things for you to look at online, for any audience to look at online, that if you're not catching their attention right away, if it's not quick and digestible, it attracts their attention, right? That's a problem. So you're looking at, whoever your public figure is, and you're thinking about how do they use this space as a way to engage their audience, right? And so that means a couple of things. So one is obviously using that lens of the rhetorical appeals, right? Thinking about how does somebody establish their credibility or kind of build on their credibility, right? You might already know something, right? You might know Vin Diesel as an actor before you go to his Facebook profile. You probably recognize Bernie Sanders' name before you go to his Twitter account, right? Or who J.K. Rowling is before you go to a Twitter account, which is good, right? But how then do they kind of build upon that persona? And so that might be one thing for a politician, right? Because what does a politician want to do? They want to convince you to vote for them, that they're the right person for the job. It's a very different thing for, an author like J.K. Rowling, right? Does she need to convince people she's a good author? No, she's got the whole Harry Potter series that's, sold millions of books, right? And she's got a whole kind of empire around her content, right? New movies coming out, new plays coming out, things like that. But it is an extension of her persona, right? It allows her to present herself online and engage with her fans and her audience in a different way, than just seeing them at signings or something like that. Or even just, it's a different interaction with people just reading her books, and she'll interact with her fans and her followers. And so that kind of allows Rowling to be, an author and a really popular and really successful one, but also somebody who's a little bit more accessible, who's engaged with her fans, who answers their questions about her stories and the narrative worlds and things like that. And so it could be a good place to kind of, provide a different angle. Politicians, obviously, right? Facebook and Twitter can be great places to engage their potential voters, talk about current issues, things like that. But they're also very easy places to kind of misrepresent information and statistics and all that kind of stuff too. So you're thinking about that, so how is somebody establishing their credibility in this space or building on their credibility, right? How do they kind of reach out to their audience and make themselves trustworthy or credible through Facebook or Twitter, right? And then, with emotion, that's kind of one of the most common things we see, right? Funny jokes. George Takei is a great example of, the kind of quips and the little jokes and things like that, right? Quick images, that kind of stuff. These are more emotional appeals. We kind of laugh, we feel sad for a minute, things like that. And those can be helpful, right? And they can be engaging, but, swing one way is too much of that emotion, right? We're not going to see a lot of the specific engagement. When you think about the Sarah McLachlan ASPCA commercials that one of the videos talked about last week, right? In advertising, it's really sad, probably to the point where it's too sad to be effective. There's too much emotion and not enough else there to get people engaged. So, are they using a good balance of emotion on their profile? Are they accessible? Does this seem like it's just kind of, I just wrote something, I shared it, that's it? Or is it all about emotion and it kind of lacks a message? So now something like logic is important too, but you also want to think about logic differs, for different audiences and different purposes. And so logic for one group, like let's say, Lady Gaga talking about a cause she's particularly invested in, right? Her logic might be, this is a cause worth investing in, check it out, right? Maybe here's a few pieces of information or statistics or things like that. A politician like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, we expect a lot more logic from them, right? If this is somebody who's going to be convincing us that they're going to be the leader of the United States, we have to know that they know what they're talking about. They have to prove to us, right? So we should see a lot of information, a lot of good research to back that up, right? If we don't, that's a problem, right? So if you notice a lack of a rhetorical appeal, that's not necessarily a horrible thing down the road, right? There's not a lot of emotion. That's not a big deal all the time, but it depends on the purpose. If your job is to get people passionate and engaged with your work, or you really want to fire them up and get them to vote for you, if you don't have emotion, that's a problem, right? On the other hand, if it's a lot of emotion, but very little logic, right? Very little support, little message behind it, that's a problem too. So these are the things you want to be thinking about and looking at in your rhetorical analysis, right? So how do they use each of the rhetorical appeals? And you're looking for particular examples. Like, you want to pull out specific posts and not just say, oh, they kind of do this, right? So one of the things you can focus on are types of practices is a good way to describe it, right? So, I was talking about Bernie Sanders in the image a little while ago, right? There's a lot of images of that on his Facebook or his campaign's Facebook and Twitter profile. They do that pretty regularly. You don't need to talk about 25 of them, right? You can talk about one or two and say, this is an example of a larger practice, a larger trend that happens pretty regularly, on his Facebook campaign page, and that gives you the ability to talk about the rhetorical work it does without, talking about 25 different posts, or just kind of listing everything you saw. So that's kind of one of the things you want to pay attention to. Timing in terms of Kairos, that's also important. Now with social media, that's both easy and difficult, right? Because you can post anything at any moment. This is obviously an extremely tragic event in Orlando just a few weeks ago with the shooting, that we're still processing and dealing with, right? But which sucks, right? It's an awful experience, but not surprisingly, for better or worse, right? Every candidate, every politician out there made a statement. Sometimes it was a kind of a horrifying statement. Why would they say something like that? But a lot of times, to express support, to kind of talk about the issue. because if you're a politician, you have to talk about it, right? But if you were on Facebook or Twitter, there were also so many just individual people who wanted to voice their support, process the tragedy, things like that. And that, so that's kind of an example of Kairos. It's not a very enlightening one, and it's again like a horrible situation. But you see people talking about it. You see them saying, okay, hey, this is the time to talk about it, right? And so with Democrats, we're staging a sit-in last week, or I guess at the shooting of this video last week. So towards the end of June, they were staging a sit-in in Congress to try to get some action on gun control, and I think they're going to go back to it once Congress reconvenes, right? So this is them, seizing a moment, saying, "Hey, people want change on this. We need to talk about it," and so they're going to take advantage of that. So that's the kind of stuff you're looking for. Movie stars is a very different type of Kairos, right? If they have a new project coming out, or artists, right? If they have a new album coming out or something like that, right? You're going to see a lot of press, a lot of, they'll share trailers, they'll talk about the movie as they're filming it, that kind of stuff, right? All that is about timing too, to build hype, to get people interested in the project before it actually comes out. So Kairos works in a lot of different ways, and it's one of those more difficult concepts, but one that's a really important one, because if you make the right argument at the wrong place at the wrong time, it's not going to succeed, or vice versa, right? So you want to look at how whoever the persona is, whoever the person is that you're looking at, how do they use the rhetorical appeals, right? Which ones do they rely heavily on? Which ones do they kind of rely a little bit on? And how does that all come together? And that's what you're kind of the key point that you're trying to make in your paper. Ultimately, how does this all come together, and is it effective, or do they achieve their goal? So along those lines, you want to think more about the technologies of Facebook and Twitter, depending on the profile you're looking at, right? How do they use Twitter, or how do they use Facebook, and the affordances and limitations, right? What you can and can't do on the site to engage the audience. So Sanders is a good example again of, posting images, and understanding, his campaign understands how these sites work and how information gets shared. So they kind of recognize that. And it's a practice that I think a lot of the other candidates have picked up more recently and kind of built upon, because it's been pretty successful in spreading information very quickly. But also, do they do online live chats, or do you see streaming videos of them at events or things like that, right? These are all the different things you can do with Facebook or Twitter. And thinking about Twitter with its character constraints, or with a 140 character tweet, is very different than your ability to write a small novel on a Facebook post. And so you're thinking about that as well, how the technology, how the context shapes the message and the information that's being presented. And so this is what you want to really kind of go through and look at the profile, put all this stuff together, and then think about, what is the purpose, and how is it achieved or not achieved, right? Your rhetorical analysis doesn't have to be positive. That's something people always think. It doesn't have to be, oh, they're doing a great job. You can talk about how they don't understand how to use Facebook or Twitter, or they just, they're not reaching out to their audience in any way, shape, or form. So these are things to keep in mind. Now, for today in the unit you're looking at, there's a couple of videos I have posted. The fallacies, the rhetorical fallacies, just kind of a quick point about those, is that a lot of times we see things that sound good, right? They might on our first kind of pass by, they might say like, oh, that seems okay, that's a good idea or a good point, but when you think about it a little bit more, it maybe doesn't stand up. It might be, instead of actually talking about the issue at hand, it attacks the person's character in an indirect way, or somebody builds an argument up in terms of the straw man just to kind of tear it back down, things like that. Or one of the most common ones, misleading statistics. It's really easy to take a statistic and either take that information and manipulate it in a way where it sounds worse than it did, right? So saying, 50% of all women who took the firefighter exam last year in Phoenix failed, doesn't sound particularly great, right? It's not, 50 isn't bad, but also the choice to say 50% failed, that automatically gives you a more negative impression. Whereas you say, and this is totally made up statistic, by the way, right? 1 out of 2 women last year passed the firefighter exam. Well, was I wrong in what I said before? No. Was I misleading you? Yeah, I was, right? I was trying to present that information in a very particular way, right? So fallacies are everywhere. and really common on social media because it's really easy to just kind of share something or post something real quickly without thinking about it. So it's something you want to keep in mind. So the video, the chapter, the talk about fallacies, these are all good things to look at and kind of keep in mind as you're looking through your profile. The couple of sample rhetorical analysis videos I think will be helpful in talking, kind of getting you more the idea of what rhetorical analysis is, and then the activity for today as well. So there's 2 rhetorical analysis videos from the Teach Argument YouTube channel. One is about a Coca-Cola advertisement from the Super Bowl this past year, and another one is a music video of Taylor Swift's Blank Space. Yeah, Blank Space music video. Sorry. And they provide really good breakdowns and of how these work as arguments and what their purpose is and whether they're successful or not, but also how thinking about the medium. So in this case, where you're thinking about Facebook and Twitter, they're thinking about the medium of music videos, medium of commercials, right? And how do they shape the argument? What are the constraints there? That kind of stuff. So there's a couple examples in the chapter as well you can look at that kind of provide a good example of what a rhetorical analysis is. So this should hopefully today get you more into what the activity is and what you're going to be doing. And again, if you have questions about what rhetorical analysis is or what you need to be doing, send me an email. Feel free to post any questions you have in that Unit 1 discussion board. Because as I say there, if you have a question, you are probably not the only person in this class that has a question. So feel free to post it and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the videos for today, kind of work through the article, things like that. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.